I'd like to give a big thank you to the ACLU for opening Pandora's box on litigation. Now, okay, I'm going to make the argument that the ruling on birthright citizenship, and I missed this yesterday, may very well end abortion or at least create some kind of legal paradox, which must be reversed and shut down permanently. Meaning, look, I know that judges are human and we do not live in a rigid world. Humans will decide when and how law is applied, even if it seems to be contradictory. But if we were to apply the law as now ruled upon, either birthright citizenship is over or abortion is over. That is, the ACLU yesterday got an injunction against Donald Trump from enforcing his ban on birthright citizenship for non-citizens. But in doing so, created a legal class to be represented as, quote, future persons. We had talked about this a couple weeks ago, last month, when the Supreme Court issued this ruling saying universal injunctions are out. The ACLU then needed to form a class of people to get a nationwide ruling. That is, it used to be that a single plaintiff would go to the court and say, I'm a guy who's impacted by this. And the judge would bang the gavel. All people now everywhere must be held to this standard. Supreme Court said that makes no sense, okay? District courts can only grant relief to the plaintiff, not change the meaning of law nationwide. The only real dissenter was Ketanji Brown Jackson. She got made fun of. Immediately following this, the ACLU sought to create a class of people. If a class of people files a lawsuit, the judge can grant relief to the entirety of that class. The ACLU requested that all persons born or future persons born after be certified as a class to be represented and be granted injunctive relief. Hold on there a minute. These people are not born yet, and they have not been injured yet. So what does that mean? I mean, injured in the legal sense. How do you grant an injunction on a ruling where an injury has not yet occurred? The way it's supposed to work is, after you're born, you file. If you don't get granted your citizenship, someone files a suit on your behalf, and then the court will grant you relief and say, you're a citizen. Not, you haven't been injured at all, we're going to grant you relief. That is, this judge granted an injunction blocking Trump from enforcing his action against people he had not yet done anything to. Now, and here's what I think is going to happen. This is going to get reversed in 2 seconds, but Pandora's box has been cracked open just a little bit. Why? If anyone, the ACLU, can get a class certification for the unborn, why could not a pro-life group make the same argument? And if the ACLU has been granted class certification on the unborn, seeking to prevent future injury, one would argue, quite literally, termination of life is the greatest of injuries. In which case, every single pro-life group right now needs to be filing a lawsuit in New Hampshire in the same court and make them answer for this, because either birthright citizenship is cooked or abortion is cooked. Let me show you where we're at. Here's the letter. First, let me say, I missed this yesterday because the New York Times reported this and they did not list the actual class certification. So I incorrectly assumed, after reading this as well as some other articles, that the judge narrowed. In one article, it said it narrowed it down to a single group, infants. And then the New York Times says it will. The District for New Hampshire judge said the decision applied nationwide to babies who would have been subject to the executive order, which included the children of undocumented parents and those born to academics. Full stop. No, it didn't. It wasn't until I actually pulled up the ruling. My bad, guys. My bad. I made a mistake, okay? But I did catch it within the same day. I made the mistake of not actually reading the ruling because when it was first reported, they said he ruled from the bench and would issue the ruling later in the day. So from ruling from the bench, there was no order other than his words. When the order actually drops, and I look it up, it says this, quote, in light of the above, the court grants the petitioner's motion and provisionally certifies the following class for the purpose of preliminary injunctive relief. All current and future persons who are born on or after February 20th, 2025, where 1, that person's mother was unlawfully present in the U.S., and that person's father was not a U.S. citizen, or the mother was temporarily here and the father wasn't a citizen. Now, okay, you may be saying, but that class is specifically undocumented kids. Hey, I'll take it. You want to make the argument that no one can get an abortion for undocumented parents? It's not going to fly. It would have to apply to everybody. The point ultimately is a judge agreed. Those who do not yet exist can be granted injunctive relief from future harm. This is the most psychotic ruling I've ever seen. Future persons, in the literal sense, applies to people not even conceived yet. Someone who might be conceived in 20 years and born in 20 years and 9 months. That's the game they're playing because they want birthright citizenship. This must be reversed. I see no reality where this is not reversed. But in the meantime, holy crap. Here's the ACLU's website. Order granting class certification. They got it, baby. Okay. I want the ACLU to argue why future persons can have legal standing to be represented as a class to prevent future injury. Injury that has not yet happened. I'm going to say it again. Injury in court would be like, so let's say somebody made a video about me where they edited it. They took the video, they edited out, it was a debate. They edited out my arguments, and then they made me look really dumb, intentionally trying to lie to defame me and discredit me. Maybe that really happened. What's my injury? Well, you can argue reputation's damaged, but in the court of law, you need literal, tangible injury. So you can't sue for something. That's fair use. They're allowed to do it, scummy as it may be. Injury would be, upon doing this, a contract was canceled, the negotiations dropped out. And if, like, let's say I was negotiating with a company to do like $1 million ad campaign, and they said, look, I got to be honest, we saw this video. We think it has damaged your reputation, and we don't think we can actually utilize your services at this point. Now I have real injury, and I can say they specifically cited this defamation, which we can prove, and that's the injury. Then you can sue. This is why typically defamation you can't sue for. Now, in all seriousness, I am somewhat being a dick. I'm being facetious. You're allowed to lie, cheat, steal, smear people, okay? In online in the debate space. I think it's smarmy and scumbaggery, but as long as if there's no real injuries, it is legal and it's allowed. Not that I think it's good or moral or just, but I'm just kind of being a dick. The point still stands. You need an actual tangible injury. If I went to the court and said, I will suffer monetary losses in the future, they'd say, get out of my courtroom. So how did this judge do this? It's because there is a resistance in the courts against Donald Trump. That's it. But hey, open Pandora's box. Let's go. So I asked my good friend ChatGPT to break this down for me and give us an assessment of how this works. The first thing I want to say is a lot of people are immediately commenting on my post saying, oh, so you're pro-life now? Well, I'll put it this way. Pro-choice today means everybody gets an abortion whenever they want. There's one woman who posted she wants to get impregnated by Trump so she can abort the baby at 9 months. And it's just like, this is psychotic. Abortion is wrong. The termination of life of the baby is completely wrong. However, my position is more of the classical Democrat, safe, legal, and rare. We don't want it to happen. It shouldn't happen. But there are medical circumstances where you enter into a very strange position where a woman has a literal need for a medical intervention that would terminate the life of a baby for some reason. And I know a lot of people argue that's never happens. It's never possible. It's not. Okay, listen. They could come out and they could say there is, potential for a really high potential for aneurysm and you're both going to die. I'm sorry, but you can't carry this pregnancy to term. The argument I've gotten from Christians is any action to try and mitigate this is not an abortion. Fine. For the sake of argument, my point is there may be a medical reason at some point a woman has to terminate and she doesn't want to. This is the argument often made by the left, but they're lying, as exemplified by their litigation. I don't see a reality where it makes sense a woman has to go to court and get legal status or standing to get a medical issue performed. Sometimes it could be life-saving and immediate. The argument made by the left, however, is to exploit people like me who don't like abortion at all and don't want it, but want to make sure we find some kind of common ground on emergency medical practices. They use that argument, but then pass laws like in Colorado where they say you can get an abortion for any reason at any time. And that, I think, should not be allowed, ever. I think it should be heavily regulated, heavily restricted, and I do not believe in abortion for no reason. There's got to be a reason, and a medical reason, in my opinion. But there's a debate over the leeway. And so I'm gonna admit right away, I don't have all the answers. Now, some people have told me I'm pro-life for believing that. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But I'm certainly not the staunch pro-life where I would say outright no abortion for any reason ever. Let's clear things up. If you're arguing that women should not get abortions for no reason, simply because it's contraception, agreed. If you're arguing that women should have to go and get a legal writ or something from a judge in order to get a medical treatment, disagreed. Call that whatever you want. I think abortion is wrong. That being said, my point here is birthright citizenship is wrong. They've entered this challenge where they are willing to sacrifice their queen in order to take the right's queen. They are offering up a major piece, which the right may want to take and do this trade. Birthright citizenship is allowed to stand, but no more abortions. Or you can't grant injunctive relief to the unborn, and therefore you can only sue after they've been injured. Here's what ChatGPT says. I asked it. Can unborn persons have legal standing in court? And it says yes, in certain cases. Unborn persons can have legal standing in court through a representative, typically a parent or guardian acting on their behalf, typically in wrongful death and prenatal injury, trusts or inheritance matters, constitutional or civil rights litigation, sometimes involving future impacts on a child who will be born. Interesting. However, legal recognition of an unborn child's standing varies by jurisdiction and context, especially regarding how the law defines personhood. I said, what if we say they are, quote, future persons? And it said labeling unborn individuals as future persons can influence how courts view the legal standing, but it does not automatically grant them rights or standing. Here's how the concept plays out legally. Injury to future persons, toxic exposure cases. Courts sometimes allow lawsuits for harms caused before birth if those harms manifest after birth. The child must be born alive for the claim to proceed. They're treated as future persons at the time of harm, but gain standing retroactively once born. Trust in estates. Future persons like unborn heirs can be represented by a guardian or ad litem. In probate or trust matters, laws often provide for such representation to protect interests even before birth. Constitutional and ethical debates. Using future persons in legal arguments is more philosophical or policy-based. Courts may consider their interests, but they typically don't have standing unless a statute explicitly grants it. Future persons may have their interests protected by others, but they do not have independent legal standing unless they are born or unless specific legal provisions grant them standing in advance. So I asked, what would happen if a federal judge decided to grant future persons legal class recognition? And it says, if a federal judge granted future persons legal class recognition, several unprecedented and controversial outcomes would follow. Immediate consequences. Courts would be recognizing plaintiffs who do not yet exist, creating a seismic shift in Article 3 standing doctrine, which requires a concrete injury. Guardian ad litem appointments. Someone would need to be appointed to represent these hypothetical individuals in court, raising logistical and ethical concerns. We're not even talking about the unborn at this point. We're talking about people not even conceived, someone who might be conceived. Appeal and likely reversal. It says higher courts would likely overturn the decision, arguing it violates the case or controversy requirement of the Constitution. Establishment precedent that standing requires current or imminent injury to a real person. The ripple effects, environmental law. Lawsuits could be filed on behalf of future generations harmed by pollution or climate change. It would reopen debates on abortion, IVF, and contraception by giving legal weight to the unborn or even unconceived. It could open the doors to representing theoretical beings like embryos, clones, or enhanced future humans. Congress might pass legislation restricting or defining personhood or standing more narrowly, and it will face constitutional amendments or judicial reforms. The bottom line, it would spark a major constitutional crisis, be swiftly challenged, and almost certainly be reversed unless a broader legal revolution occurred. It touches the foundation of legal identity, rights, and limits the limits of judicial power. This is exactly what they did. There is no greater injury than death. I mean, maybe there is, whatever, I don't know, but come on. If we're talking about rights, and you're like, okay, your property rights are protected, but we can't kill you for whatever reason. It's like, well, then your rights aren't protected, are they? If the government can just end you, or a person can just end you, how are your rights being protected? In which case, they may have accidentally opened the door to end abortion. Now, in all seriousness, I think this will just get reversed. But the question of birthright citizenship becomes interesting. The judges may then only be able to grant relief to those already injured. That is, children of undocumented parents have to be born, and then the undocumented parents can seek relief. Are these undocumented parents going to want to step forward to stand in court and challenge for the rights of this child? I hope they do. And I hope ICE is waiting outside that courtroom. I'll leave it there. Smash the like button. Share the show. Stay tuned. We got more to come for you. Follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast, and we'll see you all in the next segment.